this bring back?
Well, it never ceases, does it? I mean, unfortunately, I see her every year somewhere, and obviously I've got pictures all over my house in England and here, so I'm always looking at the Löwenbräu car and Al's pictures. It means a heck of a lot, actually. I mean, to be able to see it running, a lot of the cars we race, you never see, but the fact that the owners seem to like having their cars out, and it just shows, how reliable the cars were. I think I only ever had one engine failure in all the time I drove a 962, and of course we won a heck of a lot of races. It was a hell of an era for any of us that drove them, and it gave us a career and a history that, of course, we never thought we'd have.
This car is special, though, because this is HR1. This is the car that Al and Tom Siebold and Kevin Doran actually built in Warrington, Pennsylvania, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Al, that's what was so remarkable about Al and the guys, but the fact he had a go at it. And I couldn't believe it when it came out. It was so good. It was amazing what they did to produce a car. All right, they had a pretty good idea what to do. But I've always said, and I'll always will say, that Al was the most amazing all-round driver I've ever been with. I mean, he, as far as a personality, he was quiet compared to most. But once he was near a car, with the fabrication of the car, the engineering of the car, and then the pure driving, he was the best person I ever drove with. I mean, he was ahead of Ix and people like that because of his knowledge and his ability.
This is Tom Siebold, and Tom was the crew chief on that car. And Tom, what was the kind of reaction around the shop when Al came in and announced, well, boys, we're going to build our own Porsche 962?
I think it was a little bit of dismay, but the guys were really up to it. What Al was able to acquire, it was a big help, was the blueprint of the chassis. Now, the blueprint, it took us a while to figure it out because it was every view on one page. Plan view, side view, everything. So everything was overlaid and there were just lines all over. And it was a blueprint that was probably about 4x8, a metric sizing.
Yeah, sure.
But it was a big blueprint, and that hung up in the shop. And, of course, we had a car we could go, what is this measurement, or what is this really doing here? We could go look at the car. So that was a big help.
What was the hardest thing about the whole project? Was it just the scope of it, or what?
Well, cars had been built in the shop before. A lot of tube frame cars, the 924s, 944s. We'd also built the Can-Am cars, which were aluminum tub cars, nowhere near as complicated. So I think it was just doing it and then making sure we had tooling that we could do that with, because a lot of the bends were probably more intricate than some of the tooling we had for the sheet metal, and just making all the components.
How long did it take from boys, we're going to do this, to rolling it out for the first test session?
That's a good question. I don't recall when we started it, but I'd say it had to have been within the first 6 months of 1985. So we're still prepping. To go the other car, and we went to Portland with 2 cars. The interesting point about that was, in those days, driver nominations, who started, who qualified, the regulations were not that concise like they are today. I mean, if you're not listed now, you can't even get in the car. In those days, we just listed Al and Derek on both cars. Well, Derek was doing an IROC race during qualifying, and Al qualified both cars, and both cars were on the front row. So we were happy about that.
I bet. What's it like to have everybody back together this weekend?
Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, this year has been a big year, obviously, with IMSA's 50th. That's been big, and in the past year, I've gotten to spend some time with Derek and some time with Justin, and our old crew chief Tom Siebold was out here yesterday, which was really fun. Mike Wessner, who worked at our shop since the 70s, is here. It's a neat deal. I was at all of them, and I was at the race shop while they were prepping. I got to go to a lot of races. We were able to get out of school and go to most of these, and so it really is the best thing that I remember. Derek and Al Jr. and Chip and all the guys, and of course TV was great then. It was a really neat period of time.
Al would have been thrilled, and I think, for me, as I say, to drive with Todd this weekend and to drive with Justin, which of course, as you know, we led Le Mans in the McLaren for 16 hours. So with Andy Wallace, bless him. So, you know, I'm used to the relations, but it's nice to have trust in somebody, and it never crosses my mind that one of them is going to make an error. I'm always terrified it's going to be the old man, me.